Hi, good morning. I'm Elena Dossett, and I am here with my colleague, Mrs. Kelly Moore. And thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. I'm glad to help out.
How are you this morning?
Doing quite well. Looking forward to the interview.
Yes. Alrighty, well, we will get started. How would you define your consulting style?
Well, I'm the student support coordinator in my current position. I've also been an autism coach. So I would say my style is very relational. It's very important that you get to know the students as much as you can, their families, and learn about their learning styles, their needs, and also things of interest for them so that you can relate to the students. So I would say relational is my style.
All right. Could you clarify, you said relational and they're getting to know their needs?
Right, getting to know the student needs, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, but also getting to know what interests them so that there could be that relational piece. For example, if they're into basketball, you want to know a little bit about what they do. Are they going out for the team? What are some of their goals?
Perfect. Thank you. I am going to take some notes.
Okay, not a problem.
My next question, how do you provide support to classroom teachers?
That's a great question because if we don't support our classroom teachers, we're missing a very important part of the puzzle. So I would say, first of all, getting to know the teacher, being able to observe in their classroom, finding out what they feel their greatest needs are in the classroom, what they also feel their strengths are. For example, what type of modality do they tend to teach to most? What are the needs of the students that they're trying to help? For example, do they have a learning disability? Do they need to have more hands-on kinesthetic learning? So I support the teachers first and foremost by getting to know them, to do observations, consultations. So it's very important that I also build that relationship with the classroom teacher to be effective.
Yes, building relationships are very important.
Absolutely.
So how do you establish this relationship, especially as someone who is there to support them and not someone that is trying to confront them?
I think first and foremost, it is really important that they know that you are their peer, that you are their equal, that in no way are you there to critique them for any type of an evaluation outside of just positive feedback to help them learn to improve in their teaching style and their skill set, if you will, to help that student. So it's really, really important that they know that you're coming alongside of them, that you let them know that you've been on your own journey as a classroom teacher, which is my background. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's very, very important, that they know that you're willing to roll your sleeves up, get in the classroom with them and help them. A lot of times that puts them at ease. I think being a frequent visitor of the classroom without disrupting the classroom is also very positive because they become more relaxed the more they see you in there, the more that they know that you're just there trying to help them. And the students also become a little more relaxed the more that you're in there commonly, and then they're not as distracted by your presence.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I should add that we do a lot of training with our teachers at our school. So that is another way to build up credibility with them. And they see you as someone that is knowledgeable, maybe doesn't have it all figured out all the time, but you're willing to come alongside them.
Alrighty. Mm-hmm. So in addition to working with the teachers, I know you do a lot of work with administrators. Yes. Could you describe your work with them briefly?
Absolutely. Administration definitely has a very different role than just a typical support model role. For example, they will make final decisions that have just different responsibilities in that area. But as far as my role with them is a partnership. Mm-hmm. It is a very give and take relationship. It is built on trust. They have to know that they believe that when we go into a classroom that we are qualified, but also that we hear their needs as an administrator and the teacher's needs as a classroom educator. So I think my role with them is very much a liaison role, a support role, even for the administrator. Perhaps they have a certain need and they want me to go look in a classroom and say, can you just see how that's going? And so that trust relationship is very critical, and that keeping ourselves well trained and working together, absolutely imperative.
And then the other set of individuals besides teachers, administrators would be parents.
Absolutely.
Describe your work with parents.
Well, I always think about being a parent myself. We're all on a bit of our own journey, and we're trying to do what is always best for our child. Mm-hmm. And I always tell a parent, you are their best advocate, and I expect that when a parent comes to me, that they are advocating for the best for their child, and that's what they want to know that I will be doing on behalf of their child. So my relationship with a parent, very professional, although I do try to have a good relational piece to that as well. Recognizing that the parent may have just learned of a special need for their child. Perhaps the parent has been fighting for their child in essence since they were in their toddler stage, and they feel like they're always pushing and striving and having to struggle and fight to get what their child needs. So my goal is when they come to me is to let them relax and understand that we're on the same team, that we will do what's best for their child. And I think that that is really, really important. I think providing any kind of consultation or training for parents, especially resources in our community, is critical. Because a lot of times a parent of a special need child, it's 24/7. I always say when they come to our school, we love on them, we look after them, we may have them for a certain part of their educational career, but a parent, it's for life. So I always look at, is the parent receiving the proper support? Do they need respite care? What type of community resources would help that parent be successful? There's a lot of stress at times on our parents, as they're a lot of times going to therapies and counseling and maybe even some other components that they're trying to improve their socialization. So they're always on the go, and they just need to know someone else is there for them, and that it's a partnership. So that's how I try to help parents, mainly listening and then trying to connect resources.
That's excellent. That's an interesting point about connecting them to the community, because I'd always think, we're inside the school, what does the school do? But that's a very interesting point there.
Right. There are a number of great community resources. I think for a parent, just knowing that they're not alone is so important. And for them to understand that they can get alongside another set or a group of parents and maybe a support group that understands what it's like going through the various stages from early development all the way through high school with your child and preparing them for college or whatever their next step will be after high school.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Our school, we have from K-3 all the way to 12th grade. So how does it differ working with parents of elementary students and then we go into the secondary, middle, and high school?
I would say it's vastly different, and that's probably one of the greatest challenges of my specific job, because I work from preschool, like you said, all the way up to high school, and they're very unique and very different in the needs. I would say early on, a lot of times if there's an early diagnosis, it's walking with those parents, like I said, building that trusting relationship, helping the parent learn when to push in and when to back off and let go and trust the school is very critical. As they're going into middle school, lots of adjustments for any middle schooler, but making sure that we have all the safety nets in place to help that child be socially engaged in an appropriate manner, as well as academically, making sure those foundations that we're filling in gaps as we can to help those splintered skills that their child may have. I think the biggest difference is if you're fortunate enough to work with a parent from the very beginning, entering into school all the way to their exit in high school, is the longer you're with that parent, the trusting relationship grows. And I think we're able to learn how to help the parent know different stages of advocacy, which is really important, because I know in that elementary level, lots and lots of parent involvement. Middle school, the parent's still very involved, but the student may be a little less open to having mom and dad in this picture as much as you can imagine. So how do they advocate kind of in the background? And then by high school, you're getting into credits and graduation, and it's a whole different animal. So helping those parents at that stage just have an understanding of what's expected and what the criteria will be and how to best help their child be successful. So it's gradually teaching the parent, how to let go in certain areas so that the child can become more independent and less codependent, and then also how to be there for them in the different stages. Because childhood development, as they're getting older, the child, no matter whom they are going to feel a little less like having mom and dad right in the scene. But behind the scenes, we may meet with the student and the child and the parent and the teachers. So we're a little more private in that aspect. We always respect confidentiality, of course, but we gradually help the parent kind of behind the scenes a little more in middle and high school on the campus.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just some of the things we do.
All right, thank you. So as far as consulting to the teachers, back
Yes,
to that
yes.
idea, do you find it beneficial to conduct observations?
Absolutely. You wouldn't go to a doctor and ask them to diagnose a possible issue or an illness without them observing and asking a lot of questions and so forth, or running those tests. Same thing with us. It's hard for me to say what's going on in your classroom if I don't go in and observe. So I do a lot of observation, very informal some of the time, but that is an important component. As much as I can, I try to observe and give feedback.
And roughly, how long, I guess it depends on the case.
Yes.
How long do you
observe? It varies. It varies. Sometimes it needs multiple times. For example, I may go in for a 15 to a 30 minute, just a snapshot is what I call it, just going in for a snapshot, but I might do that several times at different times in their schedule so that I'm able to get a better global picture of what's going on. Sometimes I'm really not needing a lot more than that. Other times I'll go and sit for an hour. It just depends on the need.
And then, as far as data collection,
Yes.
how long do you think is a good amount of time to be collecting the data?
Well, I think it does vary. I usually recommend anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks once we've established what we call our baseline. There are a lot of times where if it's an emergency situation, we may do some baseline for about 2 weeks. But as far as tracking and implementation and success, we look at 4 to 6 weeks.
And how do you find data collection helpful?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you do a proper training on how to take the data collection with fidelity, and you make sure that you have that targeted behavior, especially if it's a student that we're trying to pinpoint, you want to use all forms of data collection, your ABC data collection for finding the function of the behavior. Scatter plots are very good. Time samplings are excellent if you're wondering how it's going throughout a day. So I do a lot of training with teachers on which type of data collection is best for each situation. I would say that typically on the data collection, when we are taking the data, I just do a little training to make sure that we're all looking at the same behavior, that it's very well defined. It should be measurable, and it should not be based on your emotion. It should be right there. It should be something that I can see and data collect. Yes, this happened. No, this didn't happen. So there's a lot of training that goes involved with data collection and making sure that we're all on the same page. Because if you want your data collection to be accurate, you need to make sure the fidelity of it is intact.
So do you feel that this data collection assists the teachers, assists the parents?
Absolutely, it should. And what it usually will do, will show you a pattern in the behavior. You can find out, depending on which data collection you're taking, it can have to do with intensity and duration and so forth of the behavior. There have been plenty of times where I've taken data, and once we really took it to fidelity and we looked at it across, those 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes we realize that maybe the behavior is not as intense as we're thinking, and maybe it will give us a little insight on when it's happening. Maybe it's happening early in the morning. Maybe the child is on some type of time-release medication. Maybe we're seeing it more in the afternoon. So it just puts a lot of the pieces together. It's like a large puzzle. And if at first you don't succeed, you go back and try again, and you do that. So I do believe that it gives us good feedback. And it can also give us feedback on our end as an educator, because I always talk to teachers about we shape the environment. We set the tone for our classroom, and I think it helps us as teachers own whatever part we can control. And I think that's really, really important. I always talk about we do a lot of things to intervene and set the stage for the most success for our students. There's a piece where they have ownership of it, but as an educator, I should always be looking at what can I do differently, or is there something I need to change in the way I'm presenting. And I think this is very non-threatening because it's more just factual right in front of you.
I see. Thank you. So just an overall question. As someone
Sure.
who works with someone with special needs, their families, their teachers, you see everything. What do you think are the most important skills to have?
Well, I do obviously believe your academic skills are incredibly important, especially as an educator, but I always talk to teachers and parents about making sure we understand the survival skills that a student needs. A survival skill being the basic things that you have to be able to do in a certain situation to access either socially or academically. For example, I wouldn't ask someone to do multiplication until I built the foundation of addition. And so we tend to assume at times that a child is ready for certain social engagements, for example, and they're missing some of those foundational pieces on relationship and what are the procedures in the cafeteria? What are the procedures in a hallway? What about the classroom? You know, we wouldn't go to the movies and call out like you would at a ball game. So I always think that your survival skills, both socially and academically, really need to be explored. Mm-hmm. So to me, those are the most important, and defining what they are is absolutely critical. I talk about how important it is that we're concerned about the whole child and their longevity in their life and their careers in the future. So I always talk about how important your social skills are. So I would say that I do a great amount of work on survival skills with social skills and the very basics on their academic foundation to make sure that that's solid. And I would say that's important to make sure that we don't accidentally skip that step.
All right, and how would you figure out exactly what these survival skills are?
That's a really good question. Well, first of all, I did this with a group of teachers just this year. When I was doing the training, I gave them different situations, either being in the hallway, being in a classroom, going to the cafeteria, being in their math class, or being in their PE class, being on a recess for our younger students, being in PE, going to the locker room. There's all types of skills that you need. So when I know a child is having a hard time, a lot of times I'll sit down with a teacher and say, okay, so what are you asking this student to do? And then we start breaking it down. Can they do this, or do they seem to understand this part of what's expected? So that's how you decide what the survival skill really is. You have to look at what you are expecting and how to carry it out, the procedures, and are there any gaps in their understanding of that? It can be very difficult for that middle school student who's starting to have a locker now, and they get out there and you keep wondering, the end result is maybe they're late to class every day, and the teacher is starting to maybe get frustrated. I know that they have plenty of time. I've shown them where their locker is. I'm watching that they are not making it to my class or continually late. Well, okay, so we have to decide, are they socializing and they're late? Are they getting to their locker and then really struggling to open that combination because they don't have all the dexterity and the skill set? So those are the things we do. And we say, well, to go in the hallway, for example, you need to, one, get to your locker. Two, you have to navigate all the social scene. Three, you need to be able to functionally open the locker. So, I mean, it may sound a little bit trivial, but it really isn't. Because sometimes what appears to be the issue is not even the issue at all. It may not be that they're deliberately being late to your class. They're missing a skill set, and it's causing them to be late. Of course, if they're being social, you address that as well. So, but I do think sometimes we can jump to conclusions about what we just see in the end result, but we don't really know what's happening before, and that's all your antecedents before the actual behavior.
I love that. To just look at the end result,
right?
The antecedent.
Yeah, look at what's going on before they actually display that behavior. And then it's really critical, if I might add, to not only look at what's happening before, which is the antecedent, and their actual behavior, not anybody else's behavior, but their behavior, and then the consequence is so important. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we think of the word consequence, and when I poll teachers, they think consequence is a negative, but it could just be anything that happens after a behavior. So that's what happens following the behavior that you're observing. It could be, for example, if a peer is laughing, that might be a consequence for something of their behavior. That could be encouraging the behavior or extinguishing a desired behavior. So we get into that in our trainings.
Thank you. Do you feel that communication and collaboration skills are important in your position?
I think that on a scale of 1 to 10, they're right up there, close to 10, if not 10 plus. If your communication skills are lacking, if your ability to help a student is lacking because you're not able to show that care towards them or what have you, that's a definite issue, because so much of what we do in a position like mine depends on the ability to communicate and to create a positive, safe haven, if you will, for students. Students come to me knowing that when they sit down, they can tell me whatever is going on, and I'm going to act in their best interest. That's a very important environmental piece to communicating with students and with parents. And I shouldn't leave all those teachers. You know that. No.
And have you led student staffing meetings before?
I have been a part of leading student staffing meetings, and it's very important when you're in there that you listen more than you speak, and that you really try to put the pieces together. You want to listen to all people around the table, all personnel that is concerned for this student, and whenever possible, especially as the child is getting older, that middle school, high school age, whenever appropriate, having the student come. I think that's super important, especially by high school, to see if the student can come and attend, because now they need to be taking that ownership and direction of their educational career, and I think it's very important.
What leadership qualities do you see as important as you're conducting these meetings?
I think there's a lot of things that are important. I think first and foremost, you should always be a forever learner. If you feel that you've gotten it all figured out and you know all the answers, you're probably not going to be as successful as you think in your position, because we can all learn from each other. I've had first-year teachers that just had the amazing talent and gifts in their area, and I go and observe in their classroom and I see something I'm like, that is such a great idea. Wow, I want to take that and learn more about it. So I think being a forever learner is a great sign of a leader. I think personally, in my own beliefs, especially as a Christian, it's important for me to be a servant leader. To put other people above myself is really important. That I should not only be a forever learner, very well educated, I should be a servant leader. I should be willing to get in the trenches and help. And I think that that's a sign of a good leader. And just really making sure that you're approachable is very important.
Thank you. I have learned so much through our chat.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right.